Well, hey everybody, welcome back. We are going to get into project 14 today, which is the 45-degree elbow with a curved throat as well as a curved heel or back, and that's set up there. So it's not a real big elbow, it's just a straight 8-inch by 8-inch elbow. So let's get on into it. On this page we got a little description of how they giving you some points to discuss and how they got from one point to another. And then on this next page here is the actual dimensions of the project. So let's get into it. So the first thing I did when I looked at these dimensions here was I had to determine the size of my piece, or if you got a full sheet, I guess you could just use a corner out of it too. Anyway, so I looked at the bottom and I noticed that I've got from my pivot point to my throat radius, I've got 4 inches, and then from the radius to the external radius I've got 8 plus another 1/4 inch for that Pittsburgh lock there. So I'm looking at 12 1/4 minimum in my width, and then my height was to be determined yet because we really haven't decided exactly how tall the part had to be. So now I've kind of laid this first one out already by just taking a sheet and then figuring it out. So I've set it down here and I've measured it, and I know, just for you that are learning, you need a part that's going to be approximately about 9 3/4 to 10 inches tall, plus or minus a little bit there, and that'll be enough for making your marks. So let's move on and let's show you how I established the marks to make this part of the project. This is what we want it to look like when we're complete here, something like this in these areas, like that. So anyway, like I said, you can make the left and the right. We don't have a change elbow, meaning both sides are exactly the same. It's not an 8 to a 10 or anything like that. So the radiuses will be really easy for us today. We don't have to worry about making that mirror image, that left and right. We can just flip-flop the part. Let's get on into it then. The first thing that I did when I looked at the project is I determined that my pivot point that I'm going to use to make these arcs was a 1/2 inch off the bottom of the sheet, which is kind of nice because you can set your point up a 1/2 inch as well. So the next thing I did then is I slid the part off the edge of the table, and with my scribe there, I took a 1/2 inch indication mark down that side, and then just to help me out and be consistent, I put a 1/2 inch mark down the right side also. So just like that. That established my pivot point a 1/2 inch in and a 1/2 inch up with those sides there, right here. The next thing I did is I determined where my marks had to be. So I had one at 4 inches, and then I had to deduct a 1/4 inch, so I was at 3 3/4 for that one. And then in between my 4 inch mark to my outer radius arc there was 8 inches plus an additional 1/4. So I laid that out with a tape measure. I went from the edge of the mark here, I'll start at 12, you can use the red numbers, and I got my marks at 3 3/4, and you can see the little divot point that I've already put in there with the scribe, and at 4 inches. And then I moved down the line, keeping that set where it was. I went to 12 inches because 8 and 4 is 12, right there, and then I added an additional 1/4 inch on those points. Now that I've got my points established, I can go to my scribes and determine the marks that need to be. So you can go about this a couple different ways. You can simply set your scribe, and I've already preset the scribes, that's why I've got 4. You don't have to have 4, obviously. You can do it with 1 and just reset them, but I do recommend when you do the mark on your left piece, you also make the mark on the right piece from here to here. I know the sheet's missing because I already cut it out, but I've already got it set from that part there. So with that, we're going to use the mark on the sheet, and we're going to strike that arc. Now we only need 45 degrees. That's all we're looking for. So we'll determine how to find the center of the point. Yes, you can probably take a square, and set it to 45 degrees somehow and lay it up there and do that. But I found that in the past, the most precise way of doing this is by taking that previously set dividers that we've just made an arc at a 90 degree with a 1/2 inch mark on each side, is to bring it over to that original point and then just strike an arc somewhere in the center and then set it in the other original 1/2 inch point on that arc and strike an arc in the opposite direction, because obviously half of 90 degrees is 45. The next thing I did then to establish my 45 degree angle is I took a straight edge, a level or a ruler or whatever you have there, and I determined that my marks were way up here. This is where the crosshairs were on that one there, and my original pivot point down here. If we set that up, we should have exactly a 45 degree angle. So let me try to prove that to you with the square, that it does work out. If we take our square and set it on there, that's a perfect 45 based on the 90 degree radius that we had. So a real easy trick to doing that. Okay, the next thing that I need to do is I'm going to establish my 4-inch mark. This was the 3 3/4. Okay, I think it was this one. Yep, this one's bigger by a 1/4 inch. So again, I use my original pivot point, and then we're going to strike that arc all the way around. We only really need to go to 45, but whatever you want to do, if you want to take it to 90, that's okay too. All right, so that established that arc. Then I go to the next one, 8 inches beyond, or rather at 12 inches from my pivot point, which it was, I think, this one here. Yep, that one there, 12 inches beyond. And we're going to strike that arc all the way up to the top there. And we'll finish it with the additional 1/4 inch mark on this dividers. The last one. Pull that all the way up. Notice the sheet couldn't pull a 90 degree on those because the sheet was, like I said, a scrap piece laying in the bin there. It works out, but you need to have something at least about 10 inches tall to make this thing work out for this size project anyway. And it looks like I need to extend my original 45 just a little bit. So we will do that. And if I can find my mark back, we'll take that up there. So we got our 45 degree angle marked. The next thing I want you to look at, just so you don't miss it, now that I marked that 45 degree angle there, that was from the pivot point. That was from down here. The plans say that we need to add an additional 1/2 inch onto that mark for our slip and drive or whatever it may be. So that's real simple. We can just take our tape measure down here on the bottom and measure it at a 45 degree angle, an additional 1/2 inch. And do the same up on the other end of the piece, an additional 1/2 inch. And we'll finish that up with our straight edge. So let me make sure I get that set up right there. And we'll just connect the dots, if I don't move, across the part. So now I've got my additional 1/2 inch taken into account above and beyond where the pivot point. A lot of times students will make a mistake and they'll cut that off short, so try not to make that mistake when doing this project. That's everything that you need for the marks for this project. That looks good. So let's go on here, and we can notch it out next, or we can cut it out. So how about we go into cutting this thing out? Now the radiuses, there's nothing we can do but cut it out with a 10 snips. So we'll do that. But the straight sections, if you like, and make them really nice and smooth, you can cut those out on your squaring shear. Making note to cut on the outside of the 1/4 inch mark versus the inside is always a good thing too. I've had some students in the past make that mistake. of cutting on the wrong side or the wrong 1/4 inch mark. So I'm doing the out or the back or the heel for this project. And then we'll go flip it over and we'll cut out the radius in just a second. But let's run over to the shear and we'll cut that off at our 45-degree mark. Up here on the squaring shear, now I'm going to just slice that off at the additional 1/2 inch mark. I'm not going to cut it back here, but I want to keep that on there so we got that part. So I'm just going to slip it in there. Hopefully you can see this. Lining up them marks, the scribe marks, down in between there, and slice it off. There's the chunk we just took out. Okay, back here at the bench, we're going to finish cutting out the throat area. So using your tin snips, we're going to cut that out. This time it's going to be on the, again, the outside of the mark, same it was out here. Just make sure you don't cut them the wrong 1/4 inch marks out. Okay, there we have our almost completed left-hand cheek. We got a couple little things to do yet. We got to finish putting the notches in there on our 1/4 inch marks. So with our 3/4 inch notcher, as it says per the plan, we're going to set them on those previously scribed 1/4 inch arcs, and we'll take them out. With our tin snips, we'll finish cutting off the reliefs on the corners. Set them back just a couple degrees so they don't get in the way later on as well. Making certain we don't leave any tails or anything. Like if we cut it back here, there's going to be a big tail there. So we want to get that close enough so there's no connection point there to cut yourself on. Okay, at this point in time, we are ready to run it through the edger. Okay, so we got to edge this side as well as the external side. So it doesn't really matter which one you start with. Just put it in like we've done many times before. Get it started, and then find the edges on our wheel, and we'll run that through. That's a little bit tight. And if you look at it, you'll notice that it's got a ways to go. I got to pull that in almost 1/8 of an inch. So we'll run it through again. This side turned out pretty good, but this one appears that it's still got to go a little bit. So we're going to set it back in there. And maybe I'll just run it backwards a little bit until I get it right where I need it to be with a nice smooth radius edge in there. That one's almost a little bit too far now. So with that, we'll just back that back out a little bit. The edge is pretty forgiving on most things. But it does take a little patience to get that corner rolled in there. That's not too bad. Let's start with the next one, and I'll spend maybe a little more time on that in a second. That one there didn't turn out too bad either. Maybe there's just a couple areas in there that are a little bit narrow. So we'll finish that up by watching the inner 1/4 inch mark and trying to pull it in and out according to the needs of the part. And there you go. There's the left-hand cheek for the fitting. The next project, we'll see me back here. I'll have this second one rolled and everything as well, and we'll be easy edged. We'll have that easy edged, and we'll be getting ready to make the throat as well as the heel. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.